All right, we're on. All right, the Academy, episode 3.
People have been waiting for this.
People have been waiting. I've been getting a lot of tweets. So when's the Academy? Where's the Academy? Are you guys going to do another Academy? I'm getting depressed. A lot of I won't even include. Some people were threatening extreme measures if we didn't do the Academy. So
here we are. And what's been going on since the last time? It's been about a month. It's been over a month, I think.
Yeah. Well, here, I mean, most of my energy has been focused on springtime chores and activities, kind of getting the land into shape. Spring takes a long time to creep in here in New Hampshire, but it's finally here. And so we just been doing that kind of stuff, building out new garden beds, started a new orchard area in a patch of forest that I've been clearing. Various stuff like that. Raising some chicks. Chicks are looking good. Got to get them out of the house this weekend, probably. Maybe we'll see. Stuff like that. How about you? How? I know you've been on the road. Are you still on the road?
No, I'm back. Back in Jersey, back in the basement. Back back where I need to be, I guess.
The
back where I belong.
Classic.
Finishing things up, I guess, and getting ready for the class, the course I'm teaching, starting in the fall, in June, actually.
Yeah, I saw you filled 2 separate sections.
Yeah, we got a lot of interest in that. About 65, 70 people.
Good, very good.
Turning people away at the end, and it's exciting. So we'll see where it goes. So it should be fun. But no, otherwise been kind of keeping my actually I've been not avoiding Twitter. I just haven't actually been on Twitter as much, which is usually a good thing, but it's kind of subconsciously not really doing much on there.
It's crazy. Twitter is some kind of it's its own compartmentalized part of my brain. Cause I'm like, well, what has been happening on Twitter? I'm certain I've spent plenty of time on there, but I'm not sure exactly what's happened. It's like
nothing of substance, apparently.
Nothing of too much substance, I guess. It has been kind of cool seeing a lot of these more like homesteady type people kind of starting to connect a little more and share really good information and stuff. So that's been cool to see, but nothing too overly exciting or dramatic.
Yeah, I don't know. I go through phases. It's usually just go. Yeah, it's not. Yeah, it's like just haven't had any interest in it. It's usually the same old stuff. But what has been going on in the world, except for people still going crazy? I think so.
Yeah. Yes. Last time, did we talk about it on the last episode? Talk about vaccines? I think we did. Obviously, that's still an ongoing.
It is, yeah.
Drama. I just saw someone I follow on Twitter just posted like a clip of Fauci. Sort of first, there was a woman, I don't know the people's name, some news anchor, and she was saying, it's kind of weird. Like I was trying to follow CDC guidelines, and I picked up my kid from the bus stop, and I was able to walk home without a mask based on the CDC guidelines, but my child had to wear a mask. She sort of said, so what's up with that? And he kind of danced and tap danced and all that. Didn't really say anything, except the only thing of substance he did say was, the kids will be vaccinated. The kids are gonna be vaccinated. And it's amazing the arrogance of a guy who's been just wrong, demonstrably wrong over and over. And I'm just like, I think it's wearing on a lot of people, this very kind of paternalistic type of attitude that all of the government agencies seem to be adopting and everything. And it's just.
Well, honestly, I didn't realize until last week. And I guess I did finally, against my judgment, I guess, see some news coming out. But I didn't realize that there was guidance on wearing masks outside. I actually didn't think that was anything anybody had ever even considered discussing. But apparently I've been breaking the law for the past, and so has basically everybody for the past like year and a half.
It's interesting. I think I saw your tweet about that. So like, I must be a simpleton. I never even like thought about this. back in February 2020, when you and I were both in New York City for at least a short time, um, that was basically the time where I was thinking about like, oh, I'll wear a mask freaking everywhere, especially in New York. Um, uh, I showed up then without a mask unintentionally. I drove in where I usually take the train to avoid people, and that was basically, it was that early in the whole process where I was like, at least in a city, it's dense. Outside it's probably fine, but just rather be safe than sorry. And but since then, pretty much I'm with you. I mean, it's pretty much been easy to demonstrate that people are not getting sick outside, maybe at some very minimal rate, but not enough to kind of maintain an epidemic, it seems. But
Yeah, and I mean New York's a different. I mean,
New York,
New
right?
York's a different story, and I mean, you probably you might need a respirator just to go in there. No, under normal times, you'd be better off. But no, I mean, I really, I mean, I know that people do it, but and it's fine if you want to do it, it's fine. But I didn't realize that it was like actually the guideline. I mean, I thought that you go outside to get some fresh air. I mean, the last thing you want is to be breathing in, just constantly
Well, there's
breathing with something in
there's
front of
also
your
this
face.
inflation, and it's coming from the side of the government of sort of CDC guidance and like what you called it, like you said, oh, we're breaking the law. It's not really a law, right? There's no
Yeah,
law.
yeah,
And but then you get the president of the United States coming out there and saying, oh, hey, yeah, now you can go outside again, and it's odd. It's very,
yeah.
very odd. The whole attitude, the whole posture, to me, it's creepy. And I have to say, a lot of people called this out. Wouldn't say that early, sort of maybe a year ago now, kind of April, May last year. People started saying, hey, the government's overreaching and this and that, and a lot of those people have been right.
Yeah, well, that's for sure. But actually, I'm curious. I'm actually curious if there ever actually was. I mean, there probably is written somewhere like actual guidelines on. I mean, if this guidance actually ever existed, because there's a reason why they might be coming out now and saying, yeah, we're going to relax that guideline for people who were vaccinated because they want to, start to make it lucrative, to be vaccinated for the people who are,
But yeah, but did that guidance exist before? I can't tell you with any certainty that it did.
I had never heard it before, right?
I heard so much incoherence and inconsistency. I just assumed it was just kind of day to day, whatever the thing happened to be, talking point, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the only place I've heard that actually seems to care about that was apparently in LA. There was they're like fining people hundreds or like $1,000 if you don't wear a mask outside. But other than that, I've never heard of it ever being an issue. Although around here and now, like I said, people I have noticed it. People are I guess they've become accustomed to it. But then there's a story I saw. There was a girl in Oregon who was running. I didn't know that they were making kids. I mean, kids probably shouldn't be wearing them anyway, but they're making kids who are, playing sports wear masks while they're playing sports, running track. And did you see the girl who fainted across the finish line in an 800-meter race?
No.
She actually broke like a school record or something. But as she like crossed the finish line, she fainted because she had a mask on. She's running 800 meters in a mask.
Yeah. This is not a stroll down the block. This is like,
Yeah.
yeah.
So anyway, I mean, yeah, the vaccine stuff. I'm not sure what the status on that is at this point. I mean, I did my I guess it was even after since the last time we talked, I did my a little bit of research, had my panel of people talking about it. It was mostly was all people who kind of I mean, everybody says the same thing, but I still think it's missing the point, which is that the side effects or whatever. I mean, it's just like COVID, I think, which is that um, in all likelihood, it's not going to kill you. It's not going to do any of that stuff. Although I'm not really worried about it killing me, but we really don't know. You don't know the longer term effects of it. You don't know the longer term effects of anything. And if it's going to require like a third, fourth, fifth booster shot every few months, I mean, at what point does it just become so ridiculous that it's not even worth it?
It's it's a little bit worrisome how many folks seem kind of just ready to every 3 months or whatever line up for another booster. It's kind of blowing my mind. And this is, this is to my mind, this is one of the risks around vaccination. Is it's not just this vaccine. You're setting precedent
Hmm.
for repeating this behavior. How often? With how many different viruses? I call it the logic of repetition. It's like, all right, you've done it once and everything turned out fine. Okay, we'll do it again. We'll do it again. You do it again. And all of a sudden you're very comfortable with this activity that has a huge systemic, its sort of touch points are extremely systemic. Yeah, it might not be multiplicative in the sense that it's not contagious like a virus typically, I think we could say. Um, but man, the sort of normalization of it is concerning.
Yeah. The multiplic. So that's something that people have said it's not multiplicative. It doesn't have to be if there's a. I mean, if you have a finite population and everybody gets exposed to something, it doesn't matter how fast it's being. They've all been exposed. It doesn't matter how fast it's spread. It doesn't spread at all, but they've all gotten the thing.
Right. Ultimately, it's the scale of the impact and
Yeah.
multiplicative dynamics are one way of getting to scale quickly, but you can get to scale otherwise. Yep.
But yeah, and especially in a fine, and especially in a finite setting, like which is where we're at. And yeah, I mean, I've tried, the I guess people, if you get the flu shot, you go every year, and that's in and of itself, I guess people are used to that, people who do that.
Yeah.
Um, the but so if that's part, maybe that's one thing. But at what point do you draw the line? I mean, I feel that, if we were getting a booster shot every day, right?
Right.
I mean, if you imagine something like, then you're gonna have some days you wake up, you say, I think I'll take my chances today. And
Okay.
so, at what point everybody has their threshold. And I think, for some people they're saying, well, I'll take my chances as it is right now, because especially and I think there's actually research on this. So for people who like to refer to the research and the science, I mean, I think there is research actually on the effectiveness against variants, and that one, that this isn't as effective against the variants. Two, that the current, and this isn't necessarily a reason personally not to get it, but it actually is an argument maybe against this generation of vaccines, is that these vaccines are in some sense a breeding ground for variants. Because have you heard about this? I mean, I'm not really qualified to
I've heard some
explain.
arguments along that line that sort of it's okay. Now only variants can spread, so there's some kind of mutational pressure or something. I don't. Those arguments haven't quite cohered on my read, but I can't say that I've dug deeply into
Yeah,
them.
I think there's a few, and I'm not the right person to
I
explain
mean,
it.
the
But
bottom line is this about mutations of any
yeah,
virus is that the more virus that's out there, the more mutations you're going to get. Bottom line.
yeah, but also that
Reducing the total case count, you're going to be reducing the number of variations, number of mutations. I mean, that seems pretty solid. And I don't, so to me, I don't know. Sometimes the arguments become very motivated, and that's one that struck me as motivated reasoning.
well, the thing about and this is what I've only heard this from people who study this stuff, but I don't know what they know or what's true. But um, is that the vaccine actually does not actually kill the virus, although eventually it'll die down if you're not. But it just really protects you from having symptoms. So you actually can still spread it to people who don't have who to anyone, I guess, but to people. So even though, so as these activities continue, it actually becomes a breeding ground for variants in that sense, is that it's not actually killing the virus. But I guess whether that's true or not, I guess who knows. But if that is true, or even if it's true that you can carry it, you can be an active carrier um, without while you have the vaccine, then this idea of herd immunity, I think, becomes a farce, because it's 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 the idea that people who with the vaccine can always spread to people without, because they become carriers. So I think that there's a lot of mixed messages. Nobody really seems to understand what the right message is here. I guess it's either you should get it or you shouldn't, is the bottom line.
The research that was being done at the Wuhan lab by a particular postdoc was around asymptomatic coronavirus
Mhm.
carrying in bats. And so if that's the case about these vaccines too, that okay, you can still carry it, but it's like decreasing the symptoms. I mean, this is just wild. And like, how has this not been a major theme of all of this? Of like, why are we? Not only is this happening, and not only are we exposing ourselves to it, but we're actually funding it. We're
Yeah.
funding this research, and why? I mean, the justification of funding the research is like uh, epidemic pandemic prevention, right?
Well,
So it's like it couldn't be more like twisted. It couldn't be more like horrifically ironic. Um, I'm sure that there's symptoms can only exacerbate. If you're carrying a virus, yeah, you could in principle pass it along. But if you don't have any symptoms, I think it's going to be very unlikely that you do. But I mean, if you're in close contact with someone, you live with them, you're whatever, sharing space with them for long periods of time, then yeah, you probably can. But I don't know. This whole thing is very strange.
so well, anyway, well, how are things going? I mean, are things getting back to normal? I mean, are things somewhat getting back to normal, going back the other direction from where you're at? What's the
Yeah, I mean, my region's pretty out there. People are like, what you see is that everyone's just kind of done with it overall. People are still pretty much diligent about masks indoors for
Mhm.
pseudo public space. I don't even know what we call them, inside a store, inside a restaurant, whatever. But other than that, everyone's just kind of done with it, I think. Just gonna even if there's cases, there are cases. Even if there's deaths, there are deaths going on still. People are just like, we gotta live, we gotta take our chances. And I think that after, we're 15 months into this, whatever it is, 16 months into this, yeah, yeah, you can't forgo your whole life.
Yeah, no, and that's the thing that I wonder. I mean, that's the other threshold. So everybody has that threshold, but there's a, I mean, I don't know what percentage of people it is, or how many people, who are still in the mode of lockdown mode and all that. But apparently, isn't Canada's in lockdown from what I
Oh yeah.
hear.
Oh yeah, there's
Uh,
there's a lot of that still going on. That's for sure.
So yeah, crazy to think.
Yeah, the thing that I wish came out of this that absolutely did not is sort of what you might call almost like a conservative case for precaution. Just borders, boundaries, maintain life inside. That's it. No one seems to have kind of picked up on that, taken that and run with it. I mean, I try to say that kind of thing as much as I can. I'm only one man. So, man, that should have been what came out of this, and sort of no. There's the lockdown lovers, and there's the we shouldn't do anything for anything libertarians, I guess. And man, there's nothing else. So yeah. So what else? Let's fuck coronavirus. What else is going on with you? Let's see. I saw today. I skimmed a paper you put out, um, and I literally skimmed. So I say skimmed, so I don't, you don't expect me to understand anything or whatever. But about zero knowledge proofs and sort of
Yeah,
science and stuff.
yeah. It
I
was
would like
like
to
a it
know
was
a
like a
little.
one-page paper. So you
Yes,
skimmed your.
yes. I skimmed one page, so it was very quick.
No, it was about 3 pages, 3, 4 pages, but it was just a description of it. But I mean, so this is with somebody who his name's Matt Stevenson. He's starting up I guess he's involved with a couple of things in a company called Plank and Block Science, which is these are blockchain oriented scientific scientific startups, or whatever you want to call them. But um what we did, or what this paper is about, zero knowledge data analysis, was he had a data set. He's been running this study for a while that he's demoing a lot of his new ideas through this study. But one of the ideas is that, one of the things that happens in science all the time is there's the I have a data set and I don't want to share it with anybody else, because I think it's a valuable data set and I'm going to get a bunch of papers or patents or ideas out of it, and I don't want to share it with people who are just going to take it for free and take those ideas away from me. But there's also kind of the whole open science crowd, and the whole other side of things, open access, which says, well, you got to share everything for free. And of course, these two things are kind of, well, they're clearly at odds with each other. But it doesn't really make sense to force somebody to give away everything they own for free. And there's people out there, of course, who think that that's how the world should be. But in order for certain science to progress, there does have to be some kind of sharing of information, or else nobody's going to know what these claims are based on. And so this zero knowledge idea, which we demoed, was if you have a data set, you can, it's a technology where you can kind of embed your data set into some private encrypted server, and you can run an analysis on that data set. When you can show me what the analysis is, if you want, you can show me it's this linear regression, it's exactly this line of code, and I'm going to run it on this encrypted data set. So I can see your analysis and the output of your analysis without actually seeing the data that you run it on. And there's some kind of certificate of authenticity or certificate of verification that it actually was run on this kind of private data set. But if I were to come back a year later and I said, well, let me run this other analysis on that same data set, I could do it without seeing the data set, and I would get back that same certificate, which would confirm that I actually did indeed run it on the same data set you ran it on. And if you had changed a number or changed anything, it would be obvious from the things wouldn't match up, the keys wouldn't match up. So this is a way to maybe share information without having to actually publicize that information. So that was what that was about.
I'm muted, sorry. So I think you guys, you mentioned like you ran a linear regression, you queried and ran a linear regression, something like that, but you couldn't you couldn't look at that on a scatter plot, because that would be given too much about the data.
Right. So I think that this is a new technology. I'm not sure what, there's probably all different kind of things you can and can't do, but I would assume that it's kind of within the realm of the owner of the data can say what can and can't be done with it. So yeah, you could print out all the residuals of it. You could say print Y and say that's the data set. But those are the types of things that I assume aren't going to be available. But yeah, this was just a regression that spits out the slope of the line. Yeah.
That's just from my perspective, it seems very counterintuitive to be analyzing data, never just be able to take a look at a gut check on this.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, there is that part of it where I think that it really depends on what I'm sure this has different use cases and different motivations for what you might be using it for. But yeah, I mean, in order to do an initial analysis, how can you do it without knowing what kind of what the outliers might be, or what
right
things look like?
But I mean, I think
yeah,
you guys have keyed in on a real sort of functional issue, which is people want to own their data, they want to make claims about it. How do you square those?
I mean, I think that I think it's it kind of, this wasn't on my radar even with I've heard about it for a while, but it's something that it wasn't immediately on my radar. But I've always thought there was something strange or something backwards or wrong. I couldn't pinpoint it about the whole open access, open science thing. In principle, of course, it's hard to criticize. Well, of course it's great, but just dictating that everything needs to be done openly, just dictating that everybody has to give everything away just because just because people who don't give things away sometimes lie about stuff, isn't actually the right solution necessarily.
The place I agree is if that data is essentially paid for via taxes, then I'm like, all right, you should definitely release that. There's too much tax money that flows into the academy, not this academy, and that would be cool though. We should figure it out. That stuff should be open. Those flows should be tracked somehow, and that should be open.
So there's a lot of things that are paid for with taxpayer money that should be open, starting with, well, the allocation of the money in the first place. So I guess the thing that I still think is kind of, and I understand why it's done this way, but I also don't, it's just not right from a citizen point of view. The money that gets granted to researchers by NIH or NSF or other public government agencies. So there's people who decide who gets that money. It's a panel of people. I've been on one or two of those panels, but you never get to know who those people are in that room. The names of those people should be released. They're making decisions about millions of dollars of taxpayer money. Their names should be publicly released. And of course, everybody wants to remain anonymous because they're gonna, there's these repercussions of whatever. But I've thought about that. I don't know what you think about that, but I definitely think anyone who's making decisions about where taxpayer money goes should be publicly, known for that. Mute.
Sorry, I fucking muted again. Yeah, no. I mean, publicly identifiable. I with you 100%. It's actually not something I had thought about. But yeah, if they're making decisions on behalf of the public, then it seems pretty counter the spirit of the thing for them to be anonymous and making these decisions, unilaterally, essentially, but without any kind of, I guess, check and balance on that. Sort of, okay, you decided, there it goes.
Yeah, and the way that I've thought about this because when I've been on one of these panels before, the panel director, he's known, the directors are known, kind of, they're public, they're on the NSF website. Those people are known and they're associated to the money that gets allocated. But they were very specific of saying, whatever we say in here is, I'm not making any decision. The panel does not make any decisions. It merely makes a recommendation, and the director is allowed to reject that recommendation. And this is just a bureaucratic way of avoiding having to release those people's identities, is what I think.
Right. If it's only a recommendation, then they're not really making a decision.
Yeah, you've asked my opinion. I gave you my opinion, and therefore nobody has any
have
right
it all be Bitcoin, then we can track where everything goes too.
Yeah.
Great fidelity. Yeah. Any what you got, any new takes on the whole Bitcoin situation, the whole cryptosphere in general, or?
No, what's there to have? I mean, I think, I'm totally on board with Bitcoin. I don't have a problem with Bitcoin. So what's been going on?
No. I mean, what's been going on? I mean, well, there's a price drop that in Bitcoin terms is probably not so extreme, actually. Seems to be kind of leveling out recently in the low to mid 50s, something like that. No, I was just curious if you had any, it's the action lately, I think, is that there was that really strong hype cycle, and it seems to be kind of dying down now. And I'd say it's sort of in Bitcoin's favor that the hype cycle is dying down, but the price is creeping up at the moment at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
If it sort of perfectly apes the hype cycle, then that means it's all hype, right? But
yeah, I mean, I haven't been following, like, I know that people talk about it a lot on Twitter, and so I haven't been following those discussions so closely, but I see them. I can't, I can't avoid seeing them. I don't, I don't understand all of the kind of, I guess the anti-hype, or whatever you want to call it. The FUD, I guess, is what the the other side, what they might call it. But what's the deal with that?
Oh, I mean, I think there's a lot of different angles on it. I think there's pretty much, you get the laser eyes, right? And the laser eyes are pretty toxic to interact with. I mean, mostly trollish behavior. So you get that kind of bad faith type feeling floating around. And you look at what are these people saying anything meaningful or not? And you look at what are their arguments, and they're often quite circular, like things like, oh, well, once the price stabilizes, then it will be a good store of value. And it's like, well, why will the price stabilize? Because it will, and there's no meat to it. So it's sort of like, all right, you're prophesizing something that may or may not come to pass. For me, I'm not seeing any intrinsic reason that the price should stabilize. So I mean, there's some things like that. One of the issues I have is just that and this really isn't to say that there's not value there, but it can't do all the things, in my opinion, that many claim it can do, in part because it is global in nature, because it is a unified kind of policy setting thing. Can the policy of Bitcoin update? Actually, it can, and it has, but it's a globally updated, homogenous policy. And so you're not able to do things that might be good to experiment with locally, things like that, right? So there's a lot of people, obviously it's not just Bitcoin in this space. So there's a lot of other things, and people are talking about hollow chain and some of these other things that are slightly different ideas. And so there might be sort of crypto type currency approaches that can be sort of more localized. You can kind of have a larger set of things from which to discover what works in different settings and evolve things forward. So for me, and I think the laser eye speaks to this. It's just kind of distasteful.
What's the laser eyes? Is that
What do you mean?
What is that? What is that? The people,
I'm talking about? Yeah, the laser eyes.
Okay, they're a group of people. I got you. Okay, all right.
Laser eyes. The people with lasers on their eyes all over Twitter. The Bitcoin.
I gotta watch out for them. All right.
They're fucking annoying as shit. You got to block the hell out of them. They're so annoying. So that's, there's people that I respect to get along with who have said like, well, those people annoy you, but they were necessary to kind of get Bitcoin on the map. You needed this kind of sort of cultish religiosity for this thing to stick around. And maybe, if it is true that you needed that, then I think that's actually a point against Bitcoin. But maybe you needed that. But maybe at some point you don't want that anymore. Maybe you don't want that to have fun staying poor trolls anymore, and sort of this kind of toxic attitude and stuff.
So these are the people you're talking about, like these Bitcoin diehards, or
yeah. I mean, mostly. I mean, the laser eyes thing on Twitter is pretty widespread now, but yeah, the maximalists as they're called.
Okay. So see, I haven't maybe interacted with these people, so I don't know. But I mean, I don't care about
say one critical word about Bitcoin, or even like expressing a doubt, and then you'll interact with like way too many of them.
Yeah. Well, I guess, so maybe that's why I have nothing critical to say about Bitcoin. But there's the maximalist angle on both sides, right? There's I think that there could be something to say, like the comparisons of the price fluctuations, the instabilities. I mean, that's an interpretation of Bitcoin in terms of dollars, right? So there is a dollar. I mean, there is a dollar maximalist. I mean, that's kind of the default, right? Is that we do things in terms of government currencies. So
yeah, but yes, and maybe one of the issues with the dollar is that it is too globally centralized as a currency. And maybe there should be no one single kind of reserve currency like that. Like maybe that's not the best model for transactions.
But I think so in terms of that, I mean, that's something that who decides what's the reserve currency? It's decided by, I guess, governments around the world. But how much of this behavior, how much of this is just an emergent phenomenon out of the way that people decide to interact or decide to transact, I guess, is really the question.
Yeah. I mean, it's mostly emergent, I would say, in some sense. Obviously, you have central banks issuing things and setting interest rates and all of that. But in terms of human behavior, it's mostly emergent, and that's exactly why any of them have any value whatsoever. Yeah.
So the Bitcoin thing. I mean, I understand probably very little about it. I mean, probably very few people do. There's still things to figure out about it, but the extent, I guess you kind of pointed out something, and the extent to which it's kind of simultaneously, or to the extent to which it's decentralized, but also it's globalized, and to some extent that's kind of the idea behind the its ability to decentralize, the extent that it is decentralized. I mean, whether or not that's the right implementation, I mean, the movement away from centralization is, I think, has a lot of benefits in a lot of cases. I
It's
don't know about.
centralized in a different way. It's not really the case that it's like, this is something that it's easy and convenient to talk like this system is decentralized, this one's centralized, but it's really certain dimensions across a particular system that are either centralized or decentralized. Bitcoin is decentralized in the sense that there's not a central bank, in the sense that you can do peer-to-peer transactions. In that sense, it's decentralized. In the sense of how many currencies should there be on Earth, or how many stores of value, or whatever, if your idea is like you're a maximalist and everything should become Bitcoin, then that's a kind of centralization. It's in the state space of currencies. It's in the currency space.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, and I don't that it seems an odd. I mean, that seems an odd viewpoint because of the. I mean, I would say
it's so common, or at least it's very loudly shouted.
No, yeah. I mean, I think that I don't even think that Bitcoin needs widespread adoption. I mean, it has widespread adoption, whatever adoption means, but it doesn't need universal adoption or universal acceptance to have value for the people who determine that it has value.
I certainly don't think any currency needs universal acceptance, but I'm still not convinced that a sort of a functional fungible exchange thing, I want to call it currency, whatever, that's close enough, can be decoupled from like a circular economy, from like an economy that's actually producing the stuff that makes civilization go: food, clothes, shelter. I see economies as sort of part of the physiology of the human organism and ecosystem. And it's not clear to me yet that you can kind of bootstrap it from these kind of one-off exchanges, long-range exchanges for things that are generally not the sort of fundamental stuff of life, food, stuff like that. If I were really trying hard to get some crypto to meaningfully take hold in a system, I'd be focusing on concentrating it in a space where it could start to be the exchange for everyone, universal within some boundary, universal across this state, something like that, where you can have a nice circular economy that the crypto is being used in.
Well, that's my so I think that ultimately it comes down to that's related to the value of anything, I guess, but the value of a medium of exchange or whatever is its use is determined by its usefulness, and what is it used for. And I guess, I mean, yeah, are people using these things what are they using them for? I mean, I've certainly had transactions in Bitcoin. I don't do it often. It's not that convenient, I think, is what it comes down to. Is that a problem that could be solved? It probably can be solved. But what's it being used for? I think the more use cases it gets, then the more valuable it becomes, or the chance of more of it has a chance at least to become more valuable. I guess, is there anything that, a question you might ask, or anybody might ask, would be this recent increase, is that because of some monumental breakthrough in usage, or is this still sentiment driven, or where's that coming from?
Have you seen any increase in usage? I haven't.
I haven't paid attention to it, but I haven't started using it anywhere different. I haven't seen it show up in my coffee shop or pizza place or anything like that. I have seen, I mean, there is an increased use case, and you could argue that this is built into, this is a bubble built on top of a bubble, but I do think that there's an increasing use case in Ethereum in terms of all this NFT stuff that's going on. So the extent to which that could potentially be a use case, if this can be potentially put to use for something more than just digital art or making putting memes up and selling them for a lot of money, which I'm all in favor of, but that doesn't, I don't know how sustainable that is, but definitely that does give at least a direction in which Ethereum would have use. If these NFTs.
No, it's interesting. I actually see the NFTs, even though at this moment there's kind of the feeling that the NFTs are more like the scammy thing, kind of tulip style. It might actually be the other way around. It might be that the NFTs are the true use case, and sort of establishing a consensus on ownership of digital items could turn out to be very, very useful. So I actually think the NFT stuff is in some sense more compelling, even though it's silly art. And when I say, I don't think art is silly, but the art that's being sold for a lot of money often looks to be pretty silly. So
yeah, I mean,
that's not Bitcoin, right? That's just a use of sort of
blockchain.
Yeah.
So the I mean the science thing that I did is actually part of I created an NFT as part of my participation in this.
I saw that, of the little what do you call that kind of graph?
The violin plot, yeah.
Violin plot.
So it's not the most interpretable as presented, but
no, I didn't. I looked at it. I was like, I don't know. NFT, did it sell?
It hasn't like gone up yet. It's kind of just starting the auction.
What service did you use?
I didn't put it. So it's put up by this guy Stevenson, Matt Stevenson's. He wrote this thing called Plank. So he put it up on something called Mirror. Actually, is a new kind of auction slash blog. I don't know if blog is the correct thing, but they publish the essays as NFTs and stuff like that. But one of the things that is all kind of behind this is using, I mean, it's a neat idea. I mean, we'll see where it goes. But if people are willing to pay money for some certificate of authenticity, of ownership, or of association to something, right? And maybe one of those things might be scientific research or research in general, which is, this is a study that I think needs to be done. Let me throw some money in there, and in exchange for me partially funding the study, I get a little bit of ownership in this, in the results of the study, or whatever that might mean. And there's an NFT to kind of, this is potentially, I think, an interesting idea, whether it takes off, but it would be a way to decentralize the whole scientific funding process, which is what Stevenson's part of what Stevenson's company is doing is exactly that, which is to allow people to participate in that way, which I think would, it gets to the decentralized finance stuff, which is popular now. But I think that idea is at least attractive, given what we just said before about the way that funding actually gets distributed these days by a centralized anonymous panel who are giving away other people's money.
Right.
So, and a lot of stuff doesn't get funded because it's not appealing to the people who happen to be sitting around that table. So, I mean, anything that kind of tries to solve that problem, I think is at least appealing from that point of view.
Yeah. It's something to try for sure.
So we're going to be putting stuff. We're going to eventually be putting up an option for that on our website, Researchers One, for funding. If people wanted to try to fund some research in this way, that would be an option in the future.
So what is the idea that folks would put up the research that they'd like to do, but they need funding, and then you support it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's probably we haven't mapped. I don't know exactly what it looks like, but something along those lines. So I think that the first kind of test case of this was this. So Stevenson's running this study right now. He collected a preliminary data set. He ran a preliminary analysis. That's the analysis he showed us the zero knowledge proof of. But what he wants, but there was some, there was a small sample size. It wasn't really a full-blown study. It was done with volunteers. It was done cheaply and stuff. So what he wants to do now is run a full-blown replication of it.
Mhm.
And part of how he's going to fund that is through the sale of certain NFTs and certain kind of documents associated with it. So he sold the first one for 24,000, which was probably higher, definitely higher than I expected. But and so I think that, you know, he will actually be able to fund the replication through this. And
What are you trying
so
to replicate? What's the finding?
it's, you know, it's kind of well, depending on, you know, some people have, you know, opinions that it's kind of bogus, kind of pseudoscience, but it's this it's called the Shangri-La diet. There's a actually Nassim, I think, has written stuff about this, saying that, you know, at least the results seem to be compelling, but it was never actually tested, which is there's a guy named Seth Roberts who was a psychology professor, but he did a lot of self experimentation. And one of the things that he did was with respect to some diet, which was he found that if he ate a teaspoon of olive oil or 2 teaspoons of olive oil in a window of time that was like 2 hours of time where he didn't eat anything else, his appetite was suppressed and he lost weight. And, you know, that was it. There's a book on this. It's called the Shangri-La Diet. But he never tested it, but he tested it on himself and he said, it's good enough for me. I'm using it. And so it's just kind of a test of that hypothesis. A lot of people have actually looked at it and said it seems kind of compelling, the analysis he did. He wasn't like a crazy person. He did this type of stuff all the time. So it's
I know
kind
it
of,
also doesn't require any huge magical leap of mechanism or something. I mean, you eating some food, getting some fats, and
right.
there's a reasonable story you could tell to convince yourself it's
But
not
specific
totally
to this
magic.
hypothesis was that you're getting these calories that are that have no flavor, apparently. I don't know. Olive oil, I think, has flavor, but, you know, that was the idea.
It's probably just shitty olive oil.
But anyway, that's what he's testing. And the initial findings, surprisingly enough, I mean, you know, I analyzed the data independently of him and found similar things. It comes back to either be statistically significant or very close to significant, depending on how you run the analysis, which we're not drawing any grand conclusions based on this, but at least we think that we're arguing that that's sufficient to, you know, go for the second stage of this.
You know, another place NFT stuff could be interesting is in like educational material. So you put out stuff, and you know you could just put it onto YouTube or whatever. You could also make it an NFT.
Yeah. So like, I mean, and so you would own the kind of the original
Yeah,
piece
you
of.
would. Yeah, you would own exactly. You'd own it in a different kind of way, in a very demonstrable way.
Well, that was one of the things that when it was explained to me, I mean, the first time this kind of science stuff on the blockchain or in the NFT stuff, I thought that it kind of made sense, but it was also really hard to wrap my head around, in the sense that it was the idea that, imagine, you know, if you actually owned the physical copy of, you know, Darwin's copy of The Origin of the Species, you know, that there's some value in that, even though it's the same book that everybody else bought a replica of for $15, but you owned the copy. And, you know, is there something that can be kind of replicated there from like a digital perspective? Is that, you know, you have lecture notes and I could make a million copies of them, but there's a sense in which there's like a unique, like your version of those notes or something like that.
Yeah, something like that exactly. And you know, it's actually, you know, NFT is so weird that it actually gives me some kind of hope that there could be something there, because it's the kind of thing that it's really hard to like. How will that be? It's almost like how the internet probably was early on, right? It's like, what will we talk about? What will we exchange? Like, why is that valuable? And it's
Yeah.
just weird enough that I feel like there's something there. Whereas in a way, something like Bitcoin isn't that weird. It's like we all exchange money all the time. We all have a feel for what that's like. Um, it's like not that weird.
The interesting thing about Bitcoin, I think, from me, I mean, I will say, I think I learned a lot from learning what Bitcoin was, because at first it's like you're like, well, it's nothing. It's a guy, it's people writing down that you own something, but there's there's actually nothing to own. But when you can't, in some ways it does, at least when you, from a thought experiment perspective, raise the questions of, well, what is money? What is money anyway? What is the nature of, transactions or whatever? And, I thought that was at least interesting. I don't know if that, it
I mean,
doesn't
it's
say,
like it raises those questions
Oh, yeah.
and surfaces them and whatnot. I mean, but the answer isn't that different from things we've used as money traditionally.
No, well, that's kind of the, partly, I think that's maybe what gives, is giving you pause at the same time, is what maybe gives it a chance to possibly succeed, is that it's really nothing different. It's actually boiling things down to from some people's perspective, to the bare essentials of what's necessary. But it's still, I mean, that it really is ultimately just one application of, blockchain maybe is the more, people have told me for a long time, it's not, crypto's one kind of instance of this whole blockchain thing that actually has maybe more impact, could potentially have much more impact or much more use. So I guess we'll have to see.
Yeah, I'm certain that blockchain as a technology is not going away. That's pretty clear. It's too unique among technologies, and there's too many possible use cases and way more than we could ever articulate. So I don't see that going anywhere. Of course, it's a pattern. It's not a thing, and it'll persist.
Yeah, I think the thing I'd want to see, I mean, I like this. I mean, I'm this thing that I've been fortunate enough, I feel fortunate to at least be involved with from the beginning, this science on the blockchain stuff, not because I definitely didn't come up with the idea, but I think finding actual use cases of this that is, what should I say? I don't want to say important, because that's
It's at least poking at.
But it's actually getting at problems that people, that you encounter in life, right? That or some people encounter that exist, right? Things like replication crisis or science, or the validity of certain things, which is different from selling crypto kitties or cats, these digital cats, if you're familiar with those.
No.
Oh no, those are like the original NFTs, that before NFTs, I think even were like a title or a name of a thing, that they have these like digital cat. They're basically like Pokemon, but they're each one is unique, has like a unique genetic code, and they have like different attributes.
So I've thought about putting up some of my. Maybe I should do that. Some of my like cell automata that are kind of look kind of neat, and I've played with different little variations and stuff, and each one has a unique genetic code basically, and so maybe I should be putting those up.
You can retire off of this.
Yeah, maybe so. That would be hilarious.
No. So anyway, I got to get out of here in like a minute. Believe it or not, it's
Well, you're freezing now too, or are you?
oh,
Or are you just? It's a little bit of both. You were still and freezing.
I see.
Well, cool, man. Well, good to catch up with you, and let's do it again before too long, and have a great Friday night and rest of your weekend.
Yes, sir. Good talking to you. That's a
Cheers.
wrap on the Academy.
That's a wrap. Yeah, I am recording. Stop the recording.